Hey guys, Metal Rose here. Here I am about to read the third part of this lawsuit. We are on page 43 right now out of 84 pages. It's a very long lawsuit, so I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me while I do this. And it's really important, especially to John Schaffer's case, that we read through this and understand that he's barely named in this lawsuit. So I honestly think his part in this should be completely dismissed. I hope you guys agree with me, and if you do, please like and subscribe to my channel, and you could also check out my other videos, like as many things as you possibly can here, and of course check out my comedy here on this channel and some of my music. So Part E. The defendants launched the January 6th attack to target officials charged with certifying the electoral votes and declaring a presidential election winner. The defendants' conspiracy, which culminated in the January 6th attack, targeted in a process established by federal law to count the certified electoral votes and formally declare the winner of the presidential election. Once popular votes for president and vice president have been cast, certain provisions of the U.S. Constitution, together with the Electoral Count Act of 1887, create official duties both for members of Congress and the vice president as president of the Senate. Specifically, after voting for the presidency has concluded, after presidential electors compile, sign, and certify lists of votes, the certified lists are transmitted to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate, the U.S. Constitution amends. At that point, the President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, all open the certificates and the votes shall be counted. The Electoral Act of 1887 provides that Congress shall be in session on the 6th day of January succeeding every meeting of the electors. The statute sets out a detailed process that requires a joint meeting of the Senate and House Representatives in the hall of the House of Representatives at the hour of 1 o'clock in the afternoon on that date, during which the President of the Senate opens all the certificates and papers purporting to be certificates of the electoral votes of each state. After pre-appointed tellers from the Senate and House of Representatives read the certificates of the electoral votes in the presence and hearing of the two houses, the law provides that tellers shall make a list of the votes as they shall appear from the said certificates. Once the votes have been ascertained and counted, pursuant to this process, the result of the same shall be delivered to the President of the Senate, who shall thereupon announce the Senate of the vote, which announcement shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons, if any, elected President and Vice President of the United States. 4. Defendants assemble forces in the district for their January 6th attack. On January 6, 2021, the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and their members and affiliates, including the individual defendants, attended President Trump's rally and prepared for violence. Early that morning, the vast majority of the individuals and other currently unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants, along with their Proud Boys and Oath Keepers co-conspirators, traveled together or otherwise convened in the district, congregating in groups and readying themselves for action. At approximately 11:25 a.m., a YouTube video from the Proud Boys member and live streamer Eddie Block showed members of the Proud Boys lining up before the attack, shouting out their home states. Proud Boys leader defendant Biggs is shown organizing Proud Boys members and speaking into a walkie-talkie. Defendant Nordine is shown speaking to the group through a bullhorn. Defendant Scott is captured in Block's footage, shouting, "Let's take the fucking Capitol." In response, another Proud Boys member chastised Defendant Scott for talking about their plan, saying, "Don't yell it, do it." So there's like a picture here, figure 5 image from video capturing Defendant Scott's direction to other Proud Boys on January 6th. At 12:17 p.m., President Trump directed his supporters to the Capitol. "We're going to walk to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for them," President Trump said. At this point, the defendants who were stationed throughout the crowd began to tell others that the time to break into the Capitol was coming, yelling, "Yeah, let's take the Capitol." For his part, President Trump called the crowds to action, using his position to echo and amplify the messages defendants had already started to send out. "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You'll have to show strength. You'll have to be strong." Again, the crowd responded, yes, let's storm the Capitol, invade the Capitol building, let's take the Capitol right now. So really everybody was saying that? I mean, that's not what I heard. I'm not saying that some people didn't say that, but was it really that strong? Like, we're like a million people were saying, like, let's take the Capitol? I don't know. 20 minutes before President Trump's speech concluded, members of Oath Keepers, including Defendant Watkins, left the rally and began marching toward the Capitol. As President Trump's comments neared their conclusion, his rhetoric fanned the flames that defendants had ignited, imploring the crowd to fight like hell or risk losing the country. Something is wrong here. Something is really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. The crowd chanted in response, fight like hell. At 1:11 p.m., President Trump concluded, so let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. Proud Boys member and live streamer Eddie Block filmed his co-conspirators' actions during President Trump's speech, including Proud Boys leader Defendant Biggs' efforts directing the march approximately 60 Proud Boys on the Capitol. Biggs shouted orders to the group to tighten up, hold, and turn. As President Trump concluded his speech, other individual defendants, including dozens of members of the Proud Boys in military-style tactical gear, marched toward the Capitol building. Oath Keepers members Defendant Watkins posted a message on an audio app saying, Trump's been trying to drain the swamp with a straw. We brought a shop vac. Meanwhile, Proud Boys members coordinated their movements using handheld radios and encrypted communication channels, including the Boots on the Ground channel, which was used by Proud Boys leader Biggs and Nordine. In preparation for the January 6th attack, the Proud Boys created the new Ministry of Self-Defense, new MOSD, channel to coordinate their members. The group included defendants Nordine, Biggs, Donahue, Real, and others. Donahue posted in the channel to meet at the Washington Monument and that details would be explained at the pre-meeting. Leaders and members of the Proud Boys, including defendants Nordine and Biggs, also directed the mob with a bullhorn. As they approached the Capitol, members of the Proud Boys encouraged and directed the group. Consistent with the plans articulated by Proud Boys chairman Defendant Tarrio, members of the group were not wearing typical Proud Boys colors of black and yellow, but instead were dressed incognito in dark clothing, and several held walkie-talkie-style communication devices. Although Proud Boys were told not to wear Proud Boys indicators, photos and video footage show some of them, including Defendant Pizzola, wearing clothing with the Proud Boys slogan, fuck around and find out, or FAFO. Members and affiliates of Oath Keepers donned paramilitary equipment, helmets, reinforced vests, and clothing with Oath Keepers paraphernalia specifically before arriving at the Capitol building together with several other unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants. Defendant Crowell, Watkins, Caldwell, S. Parker, B. Parker, Young, Steele, K. Meggs, and C. Meggs equipped themselves with communication devices and donned reinforced vests and helmets and goggles. 5. Defendants attacked the Capitol using coordinated violence. A. Defendants stormed the Capitol and forced their way inside. None of the defendants had authorization to enter the U.S. Capitol, which is secured 24 hours a day by U.S. Capitol Police, has permanent and temporary security barriers and posts managed by Capitol Police and permits only authorized individuals to enter. The district's MPD also provides security for the Capitol from time to time. Nonetheless, by approximately 11:30 a.m., a large group had congregated outside the Capitol, including Proud Boys and Oath Keepers leadership and certain of their members and affiliates. Outside the Capitol, members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, including Defendant Biggs, provided tactical direction to fellow defendants, including other currently unidentified defendant John and Jane Does. Defendants and their cohort began violently clashing with the MPD and Capitol Police, who tried to prevent them from entering the building. During the clash, defendants screamed at the police, repeating messages like those defendants promoted before the mob convened, such as, "We were invited here. We were invited by the President of the United States, and our President wants us here. We wait and we take orders from our President," as Officer Gunnell and a Capitol Police officer later testified before the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol House Select Committee. All of them were telling us police officers Trump sent us. Rusty's back. Figure 6. The crowd clashes with MPD and Capitol Police officers. So there's like a picture here of the police pushing back the barriers and the people kind of pushing the barriers around. And we're on page 49 now, and we're at line 188. By 12:43 p.m., the defendants, including Proud Boys individual defendants Biggs, Crestman, Collin, Kuhn, Brew, and other currently unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants, overwhelmed the police and breached the outermost barricade that had been erected to protect the Capitol. At 1 p.m., a joint session of the U.S. Congress, the joint session convened at the Capitol for members of Congress and Vice President Pence to carry out their constitutional and statutory duties of receiving and counting the Electoral College votes. At approximately the same time, Capitol Police and MPD officers in riot gear arrived to reinforce the line of officers on the Capitol steps. Undeterred, defendants and others in the crowd climbed the barriers while an unidentified John Doe defendant with a bullhorn instructed the crowd to push forward. Members of the Proud Boys led the charge at the front of the mob to breach the Capitol. Other members of the crowd even scaled the walls of the Capitol complex. See Figure 7. And then Figure 7 shows like people hanging off the Capitol and stuff like that. And that's on page 50. Members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers forced their way past the barricades, assaulted officers, and rushed toward the Capitol building. Proud Boys members, Defendant Brew, grabbed a police barricade in attempt to wrench it from law enforcement protecting the Capitol. See Figure 8. So now there's a picture here. Defendant Brew and others attempt to wrestle control of barricades away from police as they march on the Capitol. After pushing their way past another barricade, Proud Boys member Defendant Klein obtained and used the police barricade to help others climb the Capitol walls and gain access to an external stairwell. Proud Boys member Defendant Worrell, equipped with a tactical vest and communications equipment, sprayed a noxious substance, seemingly pepper spray gel, toward a line of police officers guarding an entryway to the Capitol on the west side. By approximately 1:30, the House and Senate adjourned to separate chambers to resolve an objection to the vote count, with Vice President Pence presiding over the Senate chamber. As the proceedings continued in both the House and Senate, the crowd outside the Capitol continued to grow in size and became more restless. By approximately 1:37 p.m., Defendant Scott and others made it to the lower western part of the plaza just outside the Capitol. A line of law enforcement officers stood on the Capitol steps leading to the Capitol building. As is clear from videos of the scene posted to the social media site Parler, Defendant Scott pushed two Capitol Police officers backwards up the steps to the Capitol. This violent act instigated a broader violent confrontation with police. Defendant Scott grabbed and pulled a police officer toward the mob until another officer ultimately intervened. And now there's pictures. Figure 9, Defendant Scott in green jacket and blue hat pushing an officer. Then Figure 10, Defendant Scott confronting an officer while a second officer attempts to intervene. So that's all on page 52. 1:97 past 2 p.m. Shortly past 2 p.m., Defendant Caldwell sent Defendant Watkins a text message stating, "Where are you? Pence is punked out. We are screwed. I am here at the dry fountain to the left of the Capitol." So now on page 53, we have Figure 11, storming the Capitol complex. And that's just a bunch of people, things happening over the Capitol. At approximately 2:15 p.m., the mob, led by several individual defendants, breached the Capitol by breaking windows and climbed inside the building, opening doors for co-conspirators to follow. See Figure 12. Figure 12, Defendant Pizzola uses a stolen Capitol Police riot shield to break a window of the Capitol. So where's the part where John Schaffer breaks a window of the Capitol or, beats a police officer up or sprays any type of mace at somebody? I'm still not seeing it. You know why? Because we're not going to see it. Defendants Biggs and Nordine were among the first to enter, along with a large group of Proud Boys affiliated individual defendants and unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants. As seen in Figure 12, Proud Boys members Biggs and Pizzola entered the Capitol by breaking a window using a police shield stolen from a Capitol police officer. At approximately 2:16 p.m., defendants James Minuta and other members of Oath Keepers heard that individuals had breached the Capitol. Defendant Minuta stated, "Now we're talking. That's what I came here for." Defendant James instructed the group to gather their gear and head towards the Capitol. Minuta had tactical gear on, including hard knuckles, ballistic goggles, and a tactical vest, a radio, and an earpiece with bear spray. Oath Keepers member Walden and defendants Minuta and James, along with other associates, then drove golf carts toward the Capitol, swerving around law enforcement as they rushed to join the assault. As they drove, defendant Minuta declared, "Patriots are storming the Capitol building. There's violence against patriots by DC police officers, so we're en route in a Grand Theft Auto golf cart to the Capitol building right now. It's going down, guys. It's literally going down now. Patriots storming the Capitol. Fucking war in the streets now. Word is they got into the building. Let's go." Oath Keepers leader Rhodes, who coordinated logistical details for many involved in the attack in real time, messaged another Oath Keeper leader, informing him that the members of the team had taken ground at the Capitol, instructing that we need to regroup members who are not on mission. Rhodes instructed his group to report to the south side of the Capitol, suggesting that they had strategically planned to simultaneously or near simultaneously enter the Capitol from a different entrance than the Proud Boys in order to weaken the building's defense by forcing law enforcement to defend multiple doors. Around that time, direction was given Oath Keepers defendant Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, Young, Steele, K. Meggs, and C. Meggs joined together with other currently unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants to form a military stack, the stack in parentheses, formation of individuals wearing Oath Keepers clothing, patches, insignia, and battle gear. At least one of the Oath Keepers members wore a patch that warned, "I don't believe in anything, I'm just here for the violence." At 2:22 p.m., defendants Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, B. Parker, Steele, K. Meggs, C. Meggs, Oath Keepers member Hackett, and others entered the Capitol grounds. Upon entering the grounds, they gathered in a circle. At 2:24 p.m., defendant K. Meggs received the message from Oath Keepers founder Rhodes to come to the south side of the Capitol. At 2:25 p.m., Rhodes forwarded the message to the Signal group chat with the same instructions and posted a photograph showing the south side of the Capitol. At around 2:32 p.m., Rhodes exchanged a 97-second telephone call with defendant K. Meggs, who was in the Oath Keepers stack. At 2:35 p.m., the stack maneuvered together in an organized and coordinated fashion up the steps of the Capitol, with each person keeping a hand on the shoulder of the other person in front of them as depicted in Figure 13. Figure 13, Oath Keepers advance on the Capitol in stack formation, and that can be seen on page 56 right here. Toward the top of the steps, Oath Keepers member Dolan and defendant Harrelson joined the stack. At approximately 2:40 p.m., Oath Keepers member Hackett and Dolan and defendants Crowell, Harrelson, Watkins, S. Parker, Young, Steele, K. Meggs, and C. Meggs, together with other currently unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants in their group, forcibly entered the Capitol through the rotunda door in the center of the east side of the building. The group assaulted police officers guarding the door in order to breach the building, including by throwing objects at police officers and deploying chemical irritants against them. This group of defendants, each suited up in protective combat gear, continued to maintain their stack formation as they entered, as depicted in figures 13 and 14. I'm looking at figure 14, and they don't have John circled in this figure. They have a bunch of people circled, but they don't have him. They don't have B. Parker circled either. And I'd listened to Sandra Parker's video, and she said that her husband didn't go into the Capitol, so maybe that's consistent with this photo as well. Again, I didn't read her case, but it just sounded like a damn nightmare, and that it took a toll on her husband's health. As defendant Watkins later confirmed when challenged about whether she had actually forced her way into the Capitol, force like rugby, we entered through the back door of the Capitol. Another defendant, Watkins posts, confirmed, "Yeah, we stormed the Capitol today. Tear gassed the whole, crowd, pushed our way into the rotunda, even made it into the Senate even. The news is lying, even Fox, about the historical events we created today." Defendant Young later admitted in his plea agreement that at the time he forcibly entered the building, Young believed that he and certain Oath Keepers co-conspirators were trying to obstruct, influence, and impede an official proceeding, that is, a proceeding before Congress, specifically Congress's certification of the Electoral College vote. Defendant Young later admitted in his plea agreement that at the time he forcibly entered the building, Young believed that he and certain Oath Keepers co-conspirators were trying to obstruct, influence, and impede an official proceeding, that is, a proceeding before Congress, specifically Congress's certification of the electoral vote. Around the same time, Proud Boys member Garcia uploaded a video to his Facebook account filmed from the inside of the Capitol building. He narrated his actions for his social media followers, stating, "We just went ahead and stormed the Capitol. It's about to get ugly." Later in the video, Proud Boys member Garcia can be observed directing those around him to overtake law enforcement in the Capitol. As officers attempted to stop him from advancing, he yelled, "USA, storm this shit." And then this is figure 15. Garcia uploads a video on Facebook showing him directing the crowd to storm the Capitol. Nearly simultaneously, Oath Keepers member Isaacs joined a mob advancing on the Columbus doors at the central east entrance to the Capitol. The mob includes Isaacs, then assaulted the officers who were guarding the Columbus doors, throwing objects and spraying chemical irritants at the officers as they violently pulled on the doors. At approximately 2:39 p.m., Isaacs and the mob breached the Columbus doors and entered the Capitol. On January 7, 2021, Defendant Crowell confirmed that the defendants had agreed to simultaneously attack the Capitol building through separate doors, stating, "Yes, we went in through the east back door, just as they broke through the front door. I'll have to tell you about it. It was epic." By 2:48 p.m., Defendant Caldwell sent a social media message stating, "We are surging forward, doors breached." Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and their members and affiliates, including the individual defendants, continued to force their way into the Capitol building. At 3:15 p.m., defendants James Menuda and others forcibly entered the Capitol through the east side of the rotunda, the same path that members of the stack had used to enter the Capitol earlier that day. Defendant Menuda was armed with bear spray and other tactical gear. Walden brought his 82-pound security dog into the building. Proud Boys member Eddie Block live-streamed the actions of those around him as they assaulted the Capitol, telling viewers that the flash bombs were going off. Rubber pellets were flying everywhere. Tear gas was everywhere. Block positioned himself on the second-level balcony on the Capitol grounds, where he would continue live streaming until police dispersed the crowd later that night. B. Once inside, defendants continued their violent rampage, actively seeking out the official election certification proceedings and the individuals with official functions in effort to disrupt the election certification process with threats and violence. And then we have figure 16 here on page 60. Defendants and their cohort marching through the halls of the Capitol. Defendants Brew, Pepe, and Jackman were captured on video in the photographs walking in the crowd among other defendants, John and Jane Doe's, and others within the Capitol building after overtaking law enforcement outside the building. See figure 17, which is now on page 61. Defendants, including Brew and their cohort, breached the Capitol and stormed its halls. Proud Boys member defendant Cressman was also in the crowd carrying a wooden axle handle. Cressman threatened a Capitol police officer, telling him, "You shoot and I'll take your fucking ass out." Figure 18, defendant Cressman carrying a wooden axle handle through the Capitol. Oath Keepers members Hackett and Dolan, defendants Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, Young, Steele, K. Meggs, and C. Meggs, as well as other unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants in the group, also joined the larger crowd, pushing past law enforcement who attempted to stop them. Similarly, Oath Keepers defendants Menuda and James joined other attackers in pushing a line of law enforcement officers who formed a barrier between the rotunda and the Capitol lobby. During this altercation, defendant James yanked and pushed several officers while repeatedly yelling, "Get out of my Capitol, and this is my fucking building. This is not yours. This is my Capitol." Defendant Menuda recorded these events on camera while yelling, "This is what's bound to happen. Just get out. Get out. Get these cops out. It's our fucking building. Get him out. Get him out." And now here's the picture of John. Figure 19, and that's on page 62. Defendant Schaffer shouting as he marches through the Capitol. Okay, I guess you can't shout at people. Sorry. Defendant DiCarlo, who wore a t-shirt, "Murder the Media," etched those same words into the memorial door on the east front of the Capitol. The door was intended to honor 2 Capitol police officers who died in the line of duty in 1998. At the same door, Defendant DiCarlo stole a pair of flexible handcuffs from a Capitol police officer's bag. C. Defendants breached congressional chambers in pursuit of their goal of disrupting certification of the election. When the mob first broke into the Capitol, members of the House of Representatives and the Senate were tallying the votes cast by members of the Electoral College in the 2020 presidential election. Vice President Pence was also at the Capitol in his capacity as the president of the Senate to preside over the tally of the Electoral College ballots. Having declined to suspend the Electoral College vote tally, Vice President Pence became a target of the mob's violent threats. They chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." As the events unfolded, the risk to the vice president and the members of Congress increased. Police and security personally barricaded the doors to the House chamber, where lawmakers and others were forced to take cover on the ground as defendants and others beat the doors and attempted to force their way through the barricades. Figure 20. Capitol security barricades the House chamber with weapons drawn. Figure 21. Representative Jason Crow of Colorado Center comforts Representative Susan Wild of Pennsylvania while taking cover as the defendants and others storm the Capitol. At approximately 2:30 p.m., defendants' unlawful attack on the Capitol had become so disruptive and such a threat to the safety and security that the congressional staff, members of Congress, and Vice President Pence were evacuated. The joint session was halted while law enforcement officers worked to restore order and clear the Capitol of the unlawful occupants, including defendants. So figure 22, evacuation of members of Congress. Figure 23, evacuees wear gas masks as they flee the Capitol. And figure 24, Vice President Pence in the process of being evacuated from the Capitol. Many individuals, including defendants, breached the House and Senate chambers, continuing to flaunt their activities on social media. For example, defendant Jackman broke into the Capitol with defendants Biggs and Rell, entered the gallery of the Senate chambers, and was videotaped walking up a flight of stairs in the Capitol with his hand on Proud Boys leader defendant Biggs' shoulder. Jackman entered the Senate chamber and proceeded to take a picture of himself. And then they show a picture. This is figure 25, posing for pictures after storming the Senate Capitol. But this shows Jacob Chansley. I can't tell. Maybe that's Biggs or Jackman. Why isn't Jacob Chansley named in this lawsuit? I'm just curious. Not that I want him to be. I don't want really anybody to be named in this lawsuit. It's ridiculous. A lot of these people, already paid their dues. They've already served jail time. And, I calculated everything. And if they charged every single defendant the same fine that they charged John, they at least made $3 million off of this already, just so you know. Several members of the defendants' cohort, including some of those who entered the congressional chambers, carried plastic zip handcuffs for the purpose of capturing and detaining persons, including members of Congress. See figure 26. And then figure 26, standing on the Senate floor, holding several plastic zip tie handcuffs. For hours that day, defendants and thousands of others entered and occupied the grounds of the Capitol building using violence. Then here on page 68, figure 27, the Capitol on the afternoon of January 6th. And it just shows people with Trump flags, and it looks like gas all over the place and lots of craziness. The joint session could not reconvene until approximately 8 p.m. At approximately 3:40 a.m. on January 7th, Vice President Pence affirmed the election results, formally declaring now President Biden the president-elect. Following the attack, the defendants celebrated the havoc that they had wrought on the Capitol, in some cases even proudly admitting to the conspiracy between the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and their leadership, and certain members and affiliates to carry out the January 6th attack. D. Defendants attacked law enforcement officers throughout their attack on the Capitol. Several defendants attacked police officers who attempted to defend the Capitol and members of Congress. See figures 28 and 29. So on page 69, you have crowd on figure 28 and another crowd in a different area of the Capitol on figure 29. The crowd clashed with police officers inside the Capitol, it says. Members of the crowd sprayed law enforcement officers with bear mace, a pepper spray designed to deter bear attack that is more concentrated than self-defense products meant to deter human attacks. When sprayed into the face, it causes temporary loss of sight, nasal congestion, and in some difficulty breathing. Others dragged and kicked law enforcement officers, pushed them downstairs, trampled them, punched them, and ran over them in a stampede. One MPD officer was beaten by members of the crowd with sticks, crutches, including one person wielding an American flag. See Figure 30. The MPD officer later recalled during his testimony before the House Senate that attackers were lunging at him and trying to grab his gun while chanting, "Kill him with his own gun." Figure 30. The crowd of defendants and others dragging and beating an MPD officer on the Capitol steps. I mean, and that's really terrible. But again, why is John Schaffer in this lawsuit? He didn't beat these officers. This is terrible. Figure 30. Defendant Pizzola participated in at least one group attack on another police officer. Defendant Pizzola ripped away a Capitol police officer's riot shield while the officer was physically engaged with others. Shortly after breaching the Capitol, in stack formation, defendants Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, Young, and Steele, along with Oath Keepers member Isaacs, moved from the rotunda through the northbound hallway and attempted to enter the Senate's wing of Congress. In advancing toward the Senate, Oath Keepers member Isaacs waved the crowd down the halls to the Senate and yelled, "The fight's not over." At 2:45 p.m., and after defendants Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, and Young, along with Oath Keepers members Isaacs, joined a mob pushing against a line of police officers guarding the hallway connecting the rotunda to the Senate. Defendant Watkins commanded those around her to push, and get in there, while insisting they can't hold us, the police officers. Additionally, unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants were involved in similar attacks. Proud Boys member defendant Nordine later posted a photo on Parler showing a U.S. Capitol police officer under siege using pepper spray during the January 6th attack, opinning that if you feel bad for the police officer, you are part of the problem. Defendants coordinated communication during the attack. The individual defendants and some or all of currently unidentified John and Jane Doe defendants kept in communication throughout the January 6th attack, including through the use of two-way walkie-talkie style radios, cellular telephones, and social media to coordinate their actions. Many of the individual defendants used a signal chat to discuss the ongoing attack. At 2:41 p.m. that day, a co-conspirator wrote in the group chat, attaching a picture of the southeast side of the Capitol, adding, "South side of the U.S. Capitol, patriots pounding on the doors." Around the same time, defendants K. Meggs, Crowell, Watkins, S. Parker, Young, Steele, and C. Meggs were breaching the doors of the Capitol. Oath Keepers member defendant Watkins also communicated with other members of Oath Keepers during the Capitol breach over the Zelle channel called Stop the Steal J6. Watkins, we have a good group. We have about 30 to 40 of us. We are sticking together and sticking to the plan, emphasis added. Unknown male, we'll see you soon. Jess, airborne. Unknown male, you are executing citizen's arrest. Arrest this assembly. We have a probable cause for acts of treason, election fraud. Watkins, we are in the mezzanine. We are in the main dome right now. We are rocking it. They are throwing grenades. They are frickin' shooting people with paintballs. We are in here. Unknown male responds, telling Watkins to be safe and states, "Get it, Jess. Do your fucking thing. This is what we fucking unintelligible up for," it says, so they can't figure out what it says. Everything we fucking trained for, emphasis added. Defendants also exchanged information about the location of members of Congress who, by that point, had begun to hide from the mob that was hunting them. Defendants also exchanged information about the location of members of Congress who, by that point, had begun to hide from the mob that was hunting them. Defendant Caldwell posted a Facebook message that read, "Inside, he received the following messages. Tom, take that bitch over. Tom, all legislators are down in the tunnels 3 floors down. Do like we had to do when I was in the Corps, start tearing out floors, go from top to bottom, and go through the back house chamber doors facing N, left down hallway, down step." One co-conspirator communicated to defendant Caldwell, "All members are in the tunnels under Capitol. Seal them, turn on the gas." Another affiliate, Keith Lee, reported on a podcast during the attack that backup was arriving at the Capitol, including members of the Proud Boys. In an indictment, prosecutors revealed that Rhodes, his deputy, and 3 additional members of the Oath Keepers who acted as guards for the political consultant Roger Stone on January 6th exchanged 19 phone calls during the January 6th attack, totaling over 3 hours. 6. The District of Columbia answered the call to provide support during the January 6th attack and was injured as a result. In response to concerns leading up to January 6th, MPD deployed its officers on 12-hour shifts around the district. No officers were permitted to take leave that day. Other law enforcement partners, such as the Metropolitan Transit Police and non-law enforcement agencies such as the district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency and the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department, were also supporting these efforts. The measures taken by the MPD and others to prepare for January 6th were unprecedented. Never before had the recertification of an election required such a significant allocation of law enforcement resources. Nonetheless, the resources were insufficient to counter the unprecedented violent assault on the U.S. Capitol by defendants in an attempt to halt the counting of the electoral ballots, an essential step in the peaceful transfer of the presidency. As the defense described above began to unfold, Capitol Police discovered that they could not defend the Capitol alone. Accordingly, at 12:58 p.m. on January 6th, the chief of the Capitol Police asked MPD's assistant at the Capitol office. MPD responded immediately, deploying several civil disturbance unit platoon. By the time MPD officers arrived at the Capitol, the area was in chaos. And now we're on page 74, about 10 more to go. MPD officers were engaged in a battle for hours. Many were forced into hand-to-hand combat to prevent even more of the defendants and their cohort from gaining entry into the Capitol. By 2:30 p.m., MPD resources were so overwhelmed that the district had to request additional police officers from as far away as New Jersey. MPD officers suffered physical and mental injuries as a result of the defendants' attack. At least 65 MPD officers reported sustaining injuries as a direct result of the January 6th attack. The officers' physical injuries varied, ranging from bruised arms and legs, swollen ankles and wrists, and lacerations to more serious damage such as irritated eyes and lungs from bear and pepper spray, cracked ribs, shattered spinal discs, wounds from being hit with a metal fence stake, and concussions from head blows from various objects, including metal poles ripped from the inauguration-relating scaffolding and an American flagpole. One MPD officer reported being hit on the back of the head with a pole and that the attackers had wrenched his head back. The officer sustained a concussion which necessitated visits to the neurologist and therapist. One MPD officer testified before the House Select Committee regarding the physical and mental injuries he sustained as a result of the attack. He described suffering a heart attack caused by being repeatedly hit with a stun gun, a concussion, a traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The MPD officer was electrocuted multiple times as he was beaten unconscious by the crowd while screaming for help. While the crowd was beating him with fists and hard metal objects, they shouted, "Kill him with his own gun," and they stripped his badge, radio, and ammunition from his body. As a result of his injuries, the MPD officer lost consciousness for more than 4 minutes. The MPD officer was finally driven to MedStar Washington Hospital by his MPD partner, who was also heavily injured. The officer continues to suffer psychological trauma and anxiety from the attack. A second MPD officer also testified before Congress. During the attack, that officer was crushed between a door frame and a clear plastic shield that was wielded by someone in the crowd. As he described publicly, attackers threw items at his head, attempted to wrest away his baton, and tear gassed him. At one point, someone tried to gouge his eye out. Eventually, while he was pinned against the door, another attacker beat his head against the wall. Another man wrested away the officer's baton and beat him in the face with it, leaving him with a ruptured lip and cranial injuries. Figure 31, the second MPD officer as he is crushed between a door frame and a police shield. The group pulled another MPD officer into the mob where they kicked him, beat him with poles, and stomped on him. The MPD officer eventually escaped from the mob, bleeding from his head, and was treated for a laceration that required 2 staples. Other MPD officers sustained injuries that are not yet formally reported, including scratches, bruises, and eyes burning from bear mace. The effects of the January 6th attack have continued. MPD officers continue to suffer the effects of the complex and physical emotional trauma. Dr. Beverly Anderson, a therapist who serves as the clinical director of the Metropolitan Police Employee Assistance Program, has worked with nearly 1,000 officers since the January 6th attack in effort to help them cope with physical and emotional trauma caused by the defendants and their cohort. During the course of her work, Dr. Anderson discovered that some police officers suffered head traumas as a result of the attack that previously had gone undiagnosed. The attack's impact on MPD and its officers have been long-lasting and severe. As of mid-July, more than 6 months after the attack, some of the officers who responded to the attack were still on leave as a result of the trauma they suffered at the defendants' hands. The district has incurred significant damages as a result of the defendants' unlawful actions. For the district, the fiscal costs of this attack, which are directly attributable to the defendants' calculated, pre-planned, coordinated actions, have been steep. The defendants' actions necessitated an unprecedented deployment of MPD resources. During the height of the attack, approximately 850 MPD officers were at the Capitol. By the day's end, approximately 250 additional MPD officers were in the area to support the response and aftermath. These numbers far exceed the number of officers necessary for the MPD's usual duties, including usual duties carried out during nonviolent rallies and protests, and the costs to the district arising from this expansive deployment of MPD resources was significant. The district also incurred costs related to the emergency and other medical care provided to MPD officers who were injured as a result of the defendants' actions. Dozens of MPD officers formally reported and were treated for injuries resulting from the defendant's attack. Many MPD officers also required, and in some cases still require, mental health care following the traumatic events that unfolded during the attack. The district expects to pay for continued medical care for these officers as necessary going forward, including care related to the impact of the attack on MPD officers' mental health. While the costs of the district are still being investigated and tallied, the district has preliminarily estimated that MPD incurred millions of dollars in costs during the week of January 6th alone. Count 1, 42 U.S.C. 1985, subsection 1, all defendants. Plaintiff reincorporates by reference the allegations contained in all preceding paragraphs. Plaintiff states one count under 42 U.S.C. 1985, subsection 1, against all defendants. Defendants agreed and entered into a conspiracy amongst themselves and with other co-conspirators in the United States to storm the Capitol, building violently and unlawfully on January 6, 2021. The Section 1985 conspiracy. The object of the Section 1985 conspiracy was to prevent, interrupt, hinder, and impede through force, intimidation, and threat United States officials from discharging official duties of their official positions of trust as part of the formal process for counting and certifying the count of electoral votes for the 2020 presidential election and declaring a winner of the 2020 presidential election. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris from accepting or holding the offices of President of the United States and Vice President of the United States, respectively. President Biden and President Harris from discharging any duties of the offices of President of the United States and Vice President of the United States, respectively. Defendants also conspired to injure Vice President Pence's person and property on account of his lawful discharge or performance of his duties as Vice President of the United States and President of the Senate with respect to the election. In furtherance of the conspiracy, defendants and their co-conspirators engaged in preparations and took steps to advance the goals of their conspiracy against the United States officials in advance of and on January 6, 2021, and violently overran federal and district police forces as defendants forced their way into the Capitol building, where defendants used force, intimidation, and threats to prevent Congress from following the constitutional process set out by the 12th Amendment and 3 U.S.C. 15 for counting and certifying electoral votes for and declaring a winner of the 2020 presidential election. Through these actions, defendants and their co-conspirators perpetuated malicious and unlawful acts in furtherance of their conspiracy, including but not limited to unlawfully obstructing federal officials in the performance of their constitutional duties, unlawfully trespassing on federal property, physically threatening or attempting to cause physical injury to federal, state, and municipal police officers, including MPD officers employed by plaintiff who were acting in the line of duty to protect the Capitol, and engaging in harmful bodily contact against federal, state, and municipal police officers, including MPD officers employed by plaintiff, injuring many. As a direct result of the defendants and their co-conspirators' unlawful conspiracy and the action taken in support of that conspiracy, the district suffered extraordinary damages and costs, including but not limited to costs to dispatch hundreds of MPD officers to defend the Capitol and its surroundings against the defendants' attacks, including transportation, coordination, and overtime expenses. Costs for emergency and other medical treatments for injured MPD officers, and costs for paid leave for MPD officers who could not work as a result of their injuries. Based on the foregoing, defendants are jointly and severally liable to plaintiff under 42 U.S. 1985 subsection 1 for harms suffered by the district. Count 2, 42 U.S.C. 1986, all defendant. Plaintiff reincorporates by reference the allegations contained in all proceedings and paragraphs. This count is brought by the plaintiff against all defendants. Defendants had actual knowledge of the conspiracy among the defendants and their unnamed co-conspirators described in count 1 supra. As alleged in count 1, the district suffered damages as results of defendants' section 1985 conspiracy. Defendants were all well aware that the wrongs pled in count 1 were all about to and would be committed, as defendants were present and participated actively in the conspiracy and the actions taken in furtherance of the conspiracy that resulted in the injuries suffered by the district. Thus, each of the defendants had the power to prevent or aid in preventing the commission of the same. Despite this awareness, defendants neglected or refused to prevent the conspiracy. To the contrary, defendants spread misinformation, fanned the flames of the conspiracy, actively encouraged and participated in the actions that left the Capitol in shambles, threatened a vital component of our democracy, and injured law enforcement. Based on the foregoing, defendants are liable to the plaintiff under 42 U.S.C. 1986 for the harms they caused to the district. Count 3, assault, civil conspiracy by all defendants. This count is brought by plaintiff against all defendants. As set forth, defendants agreed to participate together in a common scheme to commit unlawful acts or to commit lawful acts by unlawful means, including but not limited to unlawfully obstructing federal officials in the performance of their constitutional duties, unlawfully inciting and carrying out a riot, unlawfully trespassing on federal property, and committing numerous acts of intimidation, threats of violence, and violence. Pursuant to and in furtherance of that common scheme, the defendant's intentional actions caused harmful and offensive bodily contact with individuals in and around the Capitol, including MPD officers. Based on the foregoing, all defendants are liable to the district as civil co-conspirators for the resulting damage that day. Count 5, intentional infliction of emotional distress, civil conspiracy by all defendants. Plaintiff reincorporates by reference all allegations contained in all preceding paragraphs. This count is brought by plaintiff against all defendants. As set forth above, defendants agreed to participate together in a common scheme to commit unlawful acts or to commit lawful acts by unlawful means, including but not limited to unlawfully obstructing federal officials in their performance of their constitutional duties, unlawfully inciting and carrying out a riot, unlawfully trespassing on federal property, and committing numerous acts of intimidation, threats of violence, and violence. Pursuant to and in furtherance of that common scheme, defendants exhibited extreme and outrageous conduct that went beyond all possible bounds of decency. This conduct intentionally or recklessly caused MPD officers to suffer from severe emotional distress, as described in supra. Based on the foregoing, all defendants are liable to the district as civil co-conspirators for the resulting damage. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, plaintiff respectfully requests an award of the following relief. A declaratory judgment that actions described herein constitute a violation of 42 U.S.C. 1985, 42 U.S.C. 1986, and the torts of assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. B. Injunctive relief enjoining defendants from engaging in further violations of 42 U.S.C. 1985, 42 U.S.C. 1986, and the torts of assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. C. Compensatory damage and statutory damages in an amount to be determined at trial as to damages incurred by the district resulting from the events alleged above. D. Punitive damages at an amount to be determined at trial. E. Attorney's fees and court costs under 42 U.S.C. 1988. F. Such other relief as the court deemed just and proper. Jury demand. The district demands a trial by jury for all claims so triable. And that's it, actually. So that was up to page 82. The rest of the documents are just basically, the names of people and, who needs to be served and whatnot. And we already did that in the beginning, so it's just a lot of nonsense and paperwork that doesn't need to be read just because it's just the names of the defendants over and over again. So, anyway, after reading through that lawsuit, it really makes no sense as to why John Schaffer was named. Free John Schaffer. Let's free him today. Let's free him of this lawsuit. President Trump, please do something. This is ridiculous, especially in the case of John Schaffer. He caused no violence, destruction. And furthermore, he didn't have any information to give the judge or the district. So here we go. Let's just pray for John. Love you guys. And I got this shirt at iceearthmerch.com. I got this a while ago. It was limited edition. It was like direct to print, but it was limited edition. He only put it out for so long. And I'm so proud that I own it. And I love you guys. Go to iceearthmerch.com and go to heavymetalrose.com to follow me and like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Love you. Bye.